I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror, wedding makeup still perfect, while my marriage crumbled somewhere between the cake cutting and the last dance. The reception continued without me, without us, 100 guests drinking champagne and wondering where the bride and groom had disappeared to. I gripped the marble countertop, my diamond ring catching the light, mocking me. 30 minutes ago, I was Milena Newman, blissful newlywed. Now I was just Milena, abandoned on my wedding night. He has to be somewhere, I whispered to my reflection. My voice sounded foreign, too high and brittle. I smoothed down the front of my dress, the intricate beadwork scratching my palms. The bathroom door swung open. Sophie's concerned face appeared, her bridesmaid dress slightly wrinkled after hours of celebration. "Any sign of him?" I asked, already knowing the answer from her expression. "Nothing." She hesitated. "Your sister's missing too." My stomach dropped. Laurel's probably just helping look for Ian. Sophie's eyes flickered away from mine. Maybe. I pushed past her into the hotel corridor, the music from the ballroom a distant thrum. My heels clicked against marble as I made my way to the elevator, Sophie trailing behind me. "I'm sure there's an explanation," she said, but doubt laced her words. The elevator doors opened to our floor. I moved down the hallway toward the honeymoon suite, keycard clutched so tightly it left indentations in my palm. My hand trembled as I slid it into the slot. The room was untouched. The champagne we'd ordered sat unopened. Rose petals scattered across the king-sized bed remained undisturbed. Ian's suitcase stood by the closet, but when I unzipped it, I found it empty. "This doesn't make sense," I said, my voice hollow. "We were supposed to leave for Bali tomorrow." I checked my phone again. No messages, no missed calls. I'd already tried calling Ian 6 times, straight to voicemail. "Try Laurel again," Sophie suggested, perching on the edge of the bed. I dialed my sister's number. Voicemail, just like the previous 4 attempts. "I'm going to check her room," I said. Laurel's room was 3 doors down. I knocked first, then used the spare key card she'd given me earlier. "Laurel?" The room was empty, bed still made. Her suitcase was gone. On the desk lay a folded piece of hotel stationery. My name was written on it in Ian's handwriting. My fingers felt numb as I picked it up. I unfolded it slowly, as if delaying the moment might somehow change what was written inside. "Laurel, I can't do this anymore. Meet me downstairs when you can slip away. Everything's ready." Ian. The note slipped from my fingers. Sophie caught it, read it, then looked up at me, horror dawning on her face. "This has to be a mistake," she said, but I knew it wasn't. 1,000 tiny moments suddenly clicked into place. Laurel and Ian disappearing at the same times during wedding planning. Their inside jokes I wasn't part of. The way they'd sometimes fall silent when I entered a room. "My sister," I said, the words burning my throat. "My own sister." I sank onto Laurel's unused bed, my wedding dress billowing around me like a deflating parachute. The room tilted and spun. "I'll call hotel security," Sophie said, already dialing. "Maybe they're still in the building." But I knew they weren't. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. I stood up suddenly, adrenaline coursing through me. "The joint account." "What?" "Our joint account. We set it up last week for wedding gifts." I grabbed my phone and pulled up the banking app. The balance that had been over $30,000 this morning now read £212.47. "They took it," I whispered. "They took everything." Sophie wrapped her arm around me. "We need to call the police." I shook my head, unable to process the suggestion. "And tell them what? That my husband and sister ran off together on my wedding night? That they—" My voice broke. The room blurred as tears finally came. I'd spent 14 hours today with a smile plastered on my face. 14 hours pretending this was the happiest day of my life. And all along, they'd been planning this. "I don't understand," I said, my voice small. "Why go through with the wedding? Why not just leave?" Sophie's face hardened. "The gifts, the cash, they wanted one last payday." I thought of Ian's face as we exchanged vows that morning. How sincere he'd seemed. how he'd kissed me like he meant it, how Laurel had helped me into my dress, had whispered, "I'm so happy for you," as she fastened the buttons. My phone buzzed with a text. For one desperate second, I thought it might be Ian explaining everything. It wasn't. It was from Laurel. "I'm sorry, Mill. I never meant for this to happen, but we're in love. Please try to understand." I stared at those words until they blurred, feeling something inside me harden and crystallize. In that moment, I knew two things with absolute certainty. First, that my sister and husband had been planning this betrayal for months, and second, that I would make them regret it for the rest of their lives. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. I sat on a hard plastic chair, still in my wedding dress, while an officer named Davis typed my statement into his computer. The gentle click of keys was the only sound in the room. "And you're certain they left together?" he asked, not looking up from his screen. "Yes." My voice was flat. I'd been answering the same questions for hours. My husband and sister emptied our joint account and disappeared during our wedding reception. Officer Davis nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "And the total amount missing is $32,487. The precise figure had been seared into my brain. Wedding gifts, savings, money we'd set aside for our honeymoon. All gone. "We'll put out an alert," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "But Ms. Newman, I should be clear. This isn't technically theft. Your husband had legal access to those funds." I stared at him. "He stole our wedding money and ran off with my sister on our wedding night." "I understand how upsetting this is," he said, his tone suggesting he didn't understand at all. "But leaving a marriage, while morally questionable, isn't a crime." Sophie, who'd been silent beside me, leaned forward. "What about fraud? They clearly planned this. They went through with an entire wedding, knowing they were going to take the money and run." Davis sighed. "That's harder to prove. We'll investigate, but I want to set realistic expectations." I nodded mechanically. I'd already known this deep down. The legal system wasn't designed for betrayals like this. Dawn was breaking when Sophie drove me home. Not to the new apartment Ian and I had leased together. I couldn't bear to go there. But to my old place, which thankfully I hadn't given up yet. "You should try to sleep," Sophie said as she unlocked my door. The apartment felt abandoned, half my belongings already packed in boxes for the move that would never happen. "I need to check something first." I opened my laptop and logged into my personal bank account. Relief washed over me when I saw my savings still intact. At least Ian hadn't gotten access to everything. Then I checked my credit cards. "Oh my God," Sophie rushed over. "What is it?" He maxed out my cards. I scrolled through the transactions, each one a fresh stab. Hotel rooms, plane tickets, jewelry. I stopped at a charge from Tiffany & Co. for $4,200. He bought her a fucking bracelet with my credit card. Sophie's face darkened. "Can you dispute the charges?" "Some of them, but we were married. I authorized him as a user." My voice cracked. I trusted him. I slammed the laptop shut and finally let myself collapse. Sophie caught me as I sank to the floor, my wedding dress pooling around us like spilled milk. "I'm so stupid," I sobbed into her shoulder. "How did I not see this coming?" "You're not stupid," Sophie said fiercely. "They're monsters. This isn't on you." But it felt like it was. Every warning sign I'd ignored flashed through my mind. Ian's sudden interest in my finances, Laurel's odd questions about our honeymoon plans, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. I'd dismissed it all because I'd been so desperate to believe in my perfect life, my perfect love story. "I need to call my parents," I said suddenly, pulling away from Sophie. "Milena, it's 5 in the morning. They need to know, before Laurel spins some story." My mother answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Hello?" "Mom," my voice broke. "Something's happened." Telling my parents was worse than telling the police. My mother's gasps, my father's stunned silence, the dawning horror as they realized one daughter had betrayed the other. "We're coming over," my father said, his voice strained. "No, don't. I I need to be alone right now. After I hung up, Sophie made me tea I couldn't drink and helped me out of my wedding dress. I sat on my couch in sweats, staring at nothing, while she called the credit card companies to report fraud. "The bank opens at 9, she said, sitting beside me. "We'll go first thing, see what we can salvage." I nodded, but I wasn't really listening. I was scrolling through my phone, looking at photos from the past year. Ian and me at Christmas, Laurel and me at her birthday, the three of us at my parents' anniversary dinner. In every picture, they were standing next to each other. I zoomed in on their faces, searching for clues I'd missed. The way Ian's hand rested just a little too casually on Laurel's shoulder. The secretive smile they shared across a dinner table. "I want to see their phones," I said suddenly. Sophie looked up. "What?" "Their phone records, text messages, emails. I want to know how long this has been going on." "Milena, I work with numbers, Sophie. Data, evidence." My voice hardened. "I need to understand exactly what happened." Sophie hesitated. "Even if it hurts more, it already hurts as much as it possibly can." I set my phone down. "Besides, I need to know what I'm dealing with for the divorce." The word hung in the air. Divorce, after less than 24 hours of marriage. My phone buzzed with a text notification. Unknown number. "It's me. I know you're angry, but please don't do anything rash. We can talk about this when things calm down. I still care about you. Ian." My stomach clenched as I read his message. No apology, no explanation, just a warning to stay quiet. I showed Sophie the text. Her eyes widened. "Are you going to respond?" I stared at the message, something cold and calculating taking root inside me. The shock was wearing off, leaving something harder in its place. "No," I said, deleting the message. "But I am going to find out exactly what they did, and then I'm going to make them pay for it." 3 days after my wedding, I returned to work. I needed the distraction, the comfort of spreadsheets and data points that couldn't lie or betray me. My office felt like the only place where I still made sense. "You sure you're ready for this?" my coworker Luca asked, leaning against my doorframe. His eyes were kind but cautious. I nodded, not looking up from my computer. "I've already missed too much time." "Milena," his voice softened. "No one expects you back this soon. What happened was, I don't want to talk about it." I finally met his gaze. "Please." He hesitated, then nodded. "Lunch later. You need to eat." I agreed, just to make him leave. Once alone, I locked my door and pulled out the notebook I'd been filling for the past 72 hours. Inside were timelines, account numbers, and every scrap of information I could gather about Ian and Laurel's movements over the past year. I discovered they'd been meeting regularly on Tuesdays, days when Ian claimed to have late client meetings and Laurel said she had yoga. I found hotel charges on Ian's credit card statements going back 8 months. Laurel had opened a new email account last spring. The betrayal wasn't spontaneous. It was methodical. My phone buzzed. Another text from Ian. "The silent treatment. Real mature, Mill. We need to talk about divorce arrangements. This doesn't have to get ugly." I stared at his message, my hands shaking with rage. He'd stolen my money, my sister, my dignity, and now he wanted a civilized divorce. I typed back, "Return the money you stole, and maybe we can talk." His response came immediately. "I didn't steal anything. Joint accounts, remember?" As for the credit cards, I was an authorized user. Legally, I did nothing wrong. Legally, as if that was the only measure that mattered. I switched to my work email and found what I'd been waiting for. Confirmation from IT that they'd recovered my deleted emails. I'd told them I'd accidentally purged important client communications, but what I really wanted were the messages between Ian and me. I searched his name and found a thread from 6 months ago. He'd emailed me from work about an investment opportunity he wanted us to discuss. Found something perfect for our future. High returns, minimal risk. Let's put in 50K from your trust fund. We'll explain details tonight. I'd declined, suggesting we wait until after the wedding to make major financial moves. He'd been annoyed, but dropped it. Now I understood why. He'd been trying to access my trust fund, the one asset he couldn't touch without my signature, the one thing he and Laurel hadn't managed to steal. I closed my eyes, remembering how he'd brought it up again and again in subtle ways. We should diversify. That money's just sitting there. Don't you trust me? A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. It was Sophie. Hey, she said, slipping inside. How are you holding up? I'm fine. I gestured to my notebook. I'm making progress. She frowned at the pages of meticulous notes. This looks less like healing and more like, what, revenge? I laughed bitterly. Is that so wrong? Sophie sat across from me. I'm worried about you. You're not sleeping, you're barely eating, and this... She tapped my notebook. This isn't healthy. You know what's not healthy? Being betrayed by the two people I trusted most. My voice cracked. They planned this, Sophie, for months, maybe longer. I know. She reached for my hand, and they're awful for it, but obsessing won't help you move forward. I'm not ready to move forward. I need answers first. Sophie sighed. Have you called Gemma yet? She could help you process this. Gemma, my therapist. I'd been avoiding her calls since the wedding. I will, I lied. After Sophie left, I returned to my investigation. By lunchtime, I'd compiled enough evidence to be certain. Ian and Laurel had been planning their escape for at least 8 months. The wedding had been their final con, a way to collect gifts and cash before disappearing. But where had they gone? I opened my banking app and stared at the transactions from our emptied joint account. The last withdrawal had been made at an ATM near the airport. They could be anywhere by now. Then I remembered something. Last Christmas, Ian had mentioned wanting to visit the Amalfi Coast. Someday we'll go there, he'd said. Just imagine the views. Had he been talking to me or to Laurel? I searched his Instagram and found a saved collection titled Italy. Inside were dozens of images of coastal villas and secluded beaches. My hands moved before my brain could catch up. I logged into the travel account we'd created for our honeymoon planning. Ian had forgotten to change the password. There they were, 2 one-way tickets to Naples, Italy, departing the night of our wedding. I sat back, a strange calm washing over me. Now I knew where they'd gone. But what could I do about it? I couldn't afford to chase them across the world, and even if I could, what then? My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? I answered cautiously. Milena? A man's voice, unfamiliar. This is David from First National Bank. I'm calling about some unusual activity on your accounts. My heart raced. What kind of activity? Someone attempted to access your trust fund this morning using your credentials. Our security system flagged it as suspicious because the request came from an IP address in Italy. The room seemed to tilt. Did they succeed? No. The attempt was blocked, but given the circumstances, I'd recommend changing all your passwords immediately. After hanging up, I sat motionless, staring at the wall. They weren't done with me. They still wanted more. Something shifted inside me then. The last remnants of the woman who'd walked down the aisle 4 days ago crumbling away. In her place stood someone colder, sharper. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to my company's legal department. If Ian and Laurel wanted a war, I would give them one. And unlike them, I wouldn't have to hide or run. I had the truth on my side, and I was just getting started. You want to do what? Luca's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. We sat in the corner of a cafe 2 blocks from our office. I'd chosen it specifically because none of our co-workers came here. I need to track their financial movements, I repeated, keeping my voice low. Every transaction, every account they touch. I need to know what they're doing with my money. Luca set his cup down carefully. Milena, I sympathize with your situation, but what you're describing is illegal? I finished for him. Maybe. Probably. I don't care. His eyes widened slightly. I couldn't blame him. 2 weeks ago, I was the cautious one, the by-the-book financial analyst who triple-checked compliance regulations. Now I was asking him to help me hack into banking records. Look, I leaned forward. You're the best forensic accountant I know. You've tracked money launderers across continents. This should be simple by comparison. Those were legal investigations with court orders, Luca pointed out. This is personal. They tried to drain my trust fund yesterday. My voice hardened. This isn't just about the wedding money anymore. They won't stop until they've taken everything. Luca studied me for a long moment. Have you considered that pursuing this might cost you more than what they took? Your career, possibly even criminal charges. What else am I supposed to do? I hissed, louder than I intended. A woman at the next table glanced over. I lowered my voice again. The police won't help. The banks say Ian had legal access. My lawyer says the divorce could take months, during which they'll be living it up in Italy with my money. Luca sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. I understand your frustration, but there are legal channels, which they're counting on me to follow while they stay one step ahead. I pulled out my notebook and slid it across the table. Look at this. They've been planning this for nearly a year. They're not amateurs. He flipped through my meticulous notes, his expression growing more troubled with each page. When he reached the timeline of their meetings, he paused. You've been busy, he said quietly. I haven't been sleeping much. Luca closed the notebook. I can't help you hack anything, but, he hesitated, I might be able to help you monitor their activity legally. My heart jumped. How? We have software that tracks financial patterns across multiple platforms. It's designed for fraud detection. If you have legitimate access to any of their accounts, joint accounts, shared credit cards, we could set up alerts for certain types of transactions. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was a start. I'll take it. Luca nodded, but his eyes remained concerned. Milena, what's your endgame here? What happens when you find them? I hadn't allowed myself to think that far ahead. Justice, I said finally. I want them to face consequences. And if legal consequences aren't possible, I met his gaze steadily. Then I'll create my own. That evening, I finally returned Gemma's calls. We met at her office after hours, the space feeling both familiar and strange. I'd been seeing her for anxiety management for 2 years, but this was different. This wasn't about coping techniques or breathing exercises. I've been worried about you, she said, settling into her chair across from me. How are you holding up? I'm functioning, I replied, avoiding the cushions on her couch that seemed designed to make clients sink in and get comfortable. I perched on the edge instead, spine rigid. That's not what I asked. I stared at the abstract painting on her wall, blue swirls that used to calm me. I don't know how I'm supposed to be. Everyone keeps asking if I'm okay, and it's such a stupid question. Why is it stupid? Because of course I'm not okay. The words burst out of me. My husband and sister stole my money and ran off together on my wedding night. They humiliated me in front of everyone I know. They're in Italy right now, spending my money, laughing at how stupid I was. So, no, I'm not okay. I'm fucking furious. Gemma nodded, unfazed by my outburst. Anger is a natural response to betrayal. It's more than anger. I leaned forward. I want to destroy them like they destroyed me. And how would that work? The question caught me off guard. What? Destroying them. What would that look like? What would it accomplish? I opened my mouth, then closed it again. The fantasy had been so clear in my mind, Ian and Laurel suffering, regretting what they'd done, but the mechanics of it were fuzzy. I want them to lose everything, I said finally. Their money, their happiness, their sense of security. I want them to feel what I'm feeling. Gemma's expression remained neutral. And afterward? Once they've suffered, what then? Then, I faltered, then I can move on. Are you sure about that? Revenge often chains us to the very people who hurt us. I felt a flicker of doubt, quickly smothered by determination. I'm not chaining myself to anything. I'm taking back control. There's a difference between justice and revenge, Milena. One heals, the other infects. I stood up abruptly. I didn't come here for a lecture on morality. Why did you come? The question hung in the air between us. Why had I come? I thought you'd understand, I said quietly. I do understand. Gemma's voice softened. Better than you might think, but understanding your pain doesn't mean I won't challenge your response to it. I sank back onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. I don't know how to let this go. I'm not asking you to let it go. I'm asking you to consider what healing actually looks like for you. I had no answer for that. Healing seemed impossible, a distant shore I couldn't even see, let alone reach. My phone buzzed. A notification from the monitoring software Luca had set up. A credit card transaction in Positano, a luxury hotel booking for 2 weeks. I showed Gemma the screen. They're settling in for a nice long stay with my money. She studied my face. What will you do now? I stood up, a new resolve hardening inside me. I'm going to Italy. This is insane, Sophie said, watching me pack. You can't just fly to Italy on a revenge mission. I folded another blouse and placed it in my suitcase. It's not revenge, it's recovery. Recovery of what? The money's gone, Milena. Not all of it. I held up my phone, showing her the latest alert from Luca's monitoring software. They're making purchases with my credit cards. If I can prove it's fraud in person, and if you run into them, what then? Sophie grabbed my arm, forcing me to look at her. Have you thought this through? I pulled away. For 3 weeks, that's all I've done. Think it through, plan, calculate. The bedroom walls seemed to close in around us. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night since the wedding. My apartment had become a war room. Maps of Positano on the walls, printouts of transactions, timelines, and legal statutes covering every surface. This isn't you, Sophie said quietly. The old me is gone. I zipped the suitcase shut with a decisive tug. She died on her wedding night. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared for you. Don't be. I know exactly what I'm doing. But as I turned away, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Hollow eyes, sharp cheekbones, hair pulled back so severely it looked painful. I barely recognized myself. My phone rang. Luca. I found something, he said without preamble. Can you talk? I put him on speaker. Go ahead. I've been analyzing their spending patterns. They're burning through cash faster than expected. The hotel is expensive, I said. It's not just that. There are large cash withdrawals every few days. They're spending money like they're afraid it's going to disappear. Sophie frowned. What does that mean? It means, Luca said, they might be in trouble. Good, I replied coldly. No, Milena. Listen, I dug deeper into Ian's financial history. Before your wedding, he took out 3 high-interest loans totaling nearly $50,000. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed. What? He was already in debt when he married you. Significant debt. The implications hit me like a physical blow. So the wedding, stealing my money. It wasn't just opportunistic, Luca finished. It was desperate. Sophie sat beside me. Why would he be so desperate for cash? I don't know yet, Luca admitted, but desperate people make mistakes, and mistakes leave evidence. After we hung up, Sophie studied my face. Does this change your plans? I stared at the suitcase, my mind racing. No, it makes it more important that I go. If Ian was in debt before our wedding, this wasn't just about him and Laurel running away together. There's something bigger happening. All the more reason to let the authorities handle it. The authorities don't care, I snapped. They've made that perfectly clear. This is on me. Sophie stood up, her expression hardening. Fine, but I'm coming with you. What? No. It's not a request. You're not doing this alone. The flight to Naples was 9 hours of restless half-sleep and anxious planning. Sophie dozed beside me while I stared out the window at the darkness, wondering what I'd find at our destination. We landed at dawn, the Italian sun painting the Bay of Naples gold and rose. Under different circumstances, I might have found it beautiful. "What's our first move?" Sophie asked as we collected our luggage. "Hotel first. Then we visit the local police to file a report about the credit card fraud. And if that doesn't work?" I didn't answer. Our hotel was a modest place in Naples, nothing like the luxury resort where Ian and Laurel were staying in Positano. We checked in, showered, and prepared to visit the police station. That's when my phone buzzed with a new alert. Another transaction, this time at a jewelry store in Positano. Over €5,000. A watch. Sophie peered over my shoulder at the notification. Who spends that much on a watch when they're on the run? Someone showing off, I said bitterly. Or someone trying to convert cash into portable assets. We took a taxi to the police station, where my carefully rehearsed story about credit card fraud was met with polite indifference. The officer took my report, but made it clear that without Ian physically present using my card, there was little they could do. "Tourist areas, many financial disputes," he explained with a shrug. "Contact your bank in America." Outside the station, I fought back tears of frustration. This was a waste of time. "Not necessarily," Sophie said. "Now we have an official report. That's something." My phone rang, an unknown Italian number. I answered cautiously. "Milena Newman?" A woman's voice, professional and crisp. "Yes?" "This is Alessandra from Hotel Poseidon in Positano. I'm calling because we have a situation with your credit card." My heart raced. "What kind of situation? A man and woman have been staying here on your account for 2 weeks. Today your card was declined. They attempted to use another card, also in your name, which our system flagged as potentially fraudulent." I gripped the phone tighter. "Are they still there?" "Yes, they're quite insistent that there's been a mistake with the bank." I covered the phone and whispered to Sophie. "They're still at the hotel. Their cards just got declined." Sophie's eyes widened. "The monitoring software. Luca must have triggered a fraud alert." I uncovered the phone. "I'll be there this afternoon to sort everything out. Please don't tell them I called." After hanging up, I turned to Sophie, a surge of dark triumph washing over me. "They're trapped," I said. "No money, no escape plan." "What are you going to do?" I hailed a taxi, a cold smile spreading across my face. "I'm going to pay my dear husband and sister a visit." Sophie grabbed my arm. "Milena, wait, think about this. If Ian was desperate enough to steal from you, who knows what he might do when cornered?" The warning gave me pause, but only briefly. "I'm done hiding. I'm done being their victim." As our taxi pulled away, my phone buzzed with a text from Luca. "Be careful. Found something else. Ian owes money to dangerous people. This might be bigger than you thought." I stared at the message, a chill running through me despite the warm Italian sun. For the first time since landing, I wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. But it was too late to turn back now. Hotel Poseidon perched on the cliffside like a white jewel box, overlooking the azure waters of the Amalfi coast. Under different circumstances, it would have been breathtaking. Now, it just looked like the scene of a crime. "Are you sure about this?" Sophie asked as our taxi pulled up to the entrance. I checked my appearance in my compact mirror. Sunglasses, hair pulled back, lips painted a determined red. "Absolutely." The hotel lobby was airy and elegant, with marble floors and sweeping views of the sea. I approached the front desk, heart hammering against my ribs. "Buongiorno," I said to the receptionist. "I called earlier about a credit card issue. I'm Milena Newman." Recognition flashed in her eyes. "Ah, yes, Alessandra is expecting you. One moment, please." While we waited, I scanned the lobby, half expecting to see Ian and Laurel lounging on one of the plush sofas. The space was mostly empty, just a few tourists reading guidebooks and sipping espresso. A slim woman in a tailored suit approached us. "Ms. Newman, I'm Alessandra. Thank you for coming so quickly." She led us to a private office off the main lobby, closing the door behind us. "The situation is unusual," she said, her English precise and formal. The couple has been staying in our premium suite for 2 weeks. Until yesterday, there were no issues with payment. May I see the charges? I asked. Alessandra handed me a printout. My stomach clenched as I scanned the list. Room service, spa treatments, excursions, wine. Thousands of euros, all on my credit card. They're still in the hotel? Sophie asked. Yes. They left for breakfast about an hour ago, but said they would return to resolve the payment issue. I took a deep breath. I'd like to wait for them in their room. Alessandra hesitated. That would be highly irregular. These people stole my identity, I said, removing my sunglasses to meet her gaze. The man is my husband. He abandoned me on our wedding night and ran off with my sister. They've stolen over $50,000 from me. Her professional composure cracked slightly. See. I've filed reports with both American and Italian police, I continued, but I need to confront them directly. Sophie touched my arm. Milena, maybe we should... Please, I said to Alessandra. I've come all this way. After a moment of consideration, Alessandra nodded. I will escort you to the suite, but hotel security will be nearby, and if there is any disturbance, we will have to intervene. The walk to their suite felt surreal, like moving through a dream. The hallway stretched endlessly before me, each step bringing me closer to the confrontation I'd imagined 1,000 times. Alessandra unlocked the door and stepped aside. I'll give you privacy, but security is just down the hall. Inside, the suite was a testament to luxury and excess. Panoramic windows framing the coastline, an enormous bed, champagne bottles, and room service trays scattered about. The air smelled of Laurel's perfume, the same scent she'd worn at my wedding. Oh my God, Sophie whispered, taking in the opulence. I moved through the space like a detective, noting evidence of their life together. Ian's watch on the nightstand, Laurel's silk robe draped over a chair, shopping bags from designer boutiques, a half-written postcard. Weather is perfect. Miss you, but not ready to come home yet. In the bathroom, their toiletries mingled intimately. I picked up Ian's razor, remembering how it used to sit next to mine. Milena, Sophie called from the main room. Look at this. She held up a folder she'd found in the desk drawer. Inside were documents, bank statements, loan applications, and something that made my blood run cold, a copy of my trust fund details. They were planning to empty your trust fund completely, Sophie said, her voice shaking. There's a forged authorization letter here with your signature. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the documents trembling in my hands. They weren't just running away together. They needed my money specifically. But why? What did Ian do that? The door handle turned. We froze. Told you it's just a mix-up with the bank. Ian's voice drifted in from the hallway. We'll sort it out and be back on the beach by noon. Laurel laughed, the sound so familiar it made my chest ache. You always know how to fix things. They stepped into the suite and stopped dead when they saw us. 4 people, frozen in a tableau of shock. Ian recovered first. Milena, what the hell are you doing here? He looked different, tanned, relaxed, wearing linen pants and a designer shirt I'd never seen before. Beside him, Laurel's face had drained of color, her hand clutching his arm. Surprise, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Honeymoon's over. Ian's expression shifted from shock to calculation. This is unexpected, but maybe it's good we can talk face to face. Talk? I stood up, holding the folder of documents. About what? How you plan to drain my trust fund? Or how you've been maxing out my credit cards while playing happy couple in paradise? Laurel stepped forward. Mill, please, it's not what you think. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't call me that. Don't pretend we're still sisters. Ian moved toward me, his hands raised placatingly. Let's all calm down. We can work this out like adults. Like the adults who abandoned me on my wedding night. Who stole my money? Who betrayed me in every possible way? My voice rose with each question. You don't understand, Ian said, his tone hardening. I had no choice. There's always a choice. You chose to lie. You chose to steal. You chose her. I pointed at Laurel, who flinched as if I'd slapped her. Ian's phone rang. He glanced at it, and something like fear flashed across his face. I need to take this, he said, stepping onto the balcony and closing the door behind him. Laurel moved toward me. Milena, please listen. It's complicated. Ian is in trouble. I don't care, I cut her off. Whatever trouble he's in, he deserved it. And now you're in it too. Through the glass balcony door, I could see Ian pacing, his face tense as he argued with whoever was on the phone. You have no idea what you've walked into, Laurel whispered, real fear in her eyes. These people Ian owes money to. They're dangerous. That's why we needed your trust fund. That's why we had to leave so suddenly. Sophie stepped between us. So you thought stealing from Milena was the solution? Humiliating her, breaking her heart. We were desperate. Laurel's composure cracked. They threatened to kill him, to kill me if he didn't pay. Ian slid the balcony door open, his face ashen. They're here, in Positano. They know where we are. A heavy silence fell over the room as the four of us stared at each other, the weight of his words sinking in. Who's here? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Ian looked at me, real fear in his eyes for the first time. The people I owe money to, and now they know you're here too. We need to leave, now. Ian grabbed his passport from the nightstand and tossed Laurel's to her. Pack only what you need. Wait, I said, trying to process what was happening. Who exactly are these people? Ian shoved clothes into a duffel bag, his movements frantic. Investors, private lenders, the kind who don't use contracts or courts when deals go bad. Loan sharks, Sophie translated flatly. I had a business opportunity that went wrong, Ian said, not meeting my eyes. I borrowed money, a lot of money. Laurel zipped up her own bag, her hands trembling. They gave him 3 months to pay it back with interest. When he couldn't, they doubled the amount. So you decided to marry me, steal my money, and run? My voice cracked with disbelief. Ian finally looked at me. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. The wedding was real. But then the deadline got moved up, and I panicked. And Laurel? Was she part of your panic too? They exchanged a glance that told me everything. How long? I asked, the question barely audible. Milena, does it matter now? Laurel pleaded. We need to go. How? Long? Ian sighed. A year, maybe more. The timeline crystallized in my mind. All those late meetings, yoga classes, business trips. A year of lies while I planned our wedding. A year of betrayal while I imagined our future. You disgust me, I said, the words like acid on my tongue. Both of you. A sharp knock at the door silenced us. We all froze. Hotel security, a male voice called. Is everything all right in there? Ian motioned for us to stay quiet, but I'd had enough of his control. No, I called back. Everything is not all right. Ian lunged toward me, but Sophie stepped between us. The door opened, and a uniformed security guard entered, followed by Alessandra. There seems to be a disturbance, she said, her eyes taking in our tense standoff. These people, I said, pointing at Ian and Laurel, have stolen my identity and my money. I filed police reports in both countries. The security guard's hand moved to his radio. Ian's face hardened. That won't be necessary, he said smoothly. This is a family dispute. My wife is upset, but we're resolving it. Ex-wife, I corrected, and this isn't a dispute. It's theft and fraud. Alessandra looked between us uncertainly. Perhaps we should call the police to sort this out. No police, Ian said sharply, then caught himself. Please, we'll check out immediately and take this discussion elsewhere. A new voice joined the conversation, a man in an expensive suit standing in the doorway. I'm afraid checking out isn't an option, Mr. Norton. Ian's face drained of colour. Marco, I was just about to call you. The man, Marco, smiled without warmth. How convenient. We have much to discuss. He glanced at the security guard. Private business matter. Nothing to concern hotel staff. Something in his tone made the guard hesitate, but Alessandra stood her ground. "This is hotel property. If there's a problem—" "No problem," Marco assured her. "Just a misunderstanding about money. We'll be quiet." His polite tone carried an undercurrent of threat that made Alessandra step back. She nodded to the security guard, and they reluctantly left, closing the door behind them. Marco's smile vanished the moment they were gone. 2 more men entered the room, positioning themselves by the door and balcony. "You've been difficult to reach, Ian," Marco said, examining the suite with casual interest. "Nice accommodations. I see my investment is being put to good use." "I can explain," Ian began. "You've been explaining for months." Marco cut him off. "Explanations don't pay debts." His gaze shifted to me. "And who might this be?" "No one," Ian said quickly. "I'm his wife," I said, stepping forward. "The one he abandoned on our wedding night after emptying our joint accounts." Marco's eyebrows rose. "Interesting. You didn't mention a wife when you were begging for more time." "Ex-wife," Ian corrected, shooting me a warning look. Marco studied me with new interest. "My condolences on your marriage. It seems we've both been deceived by Mr. Norton." The room felt charged with dangerous energy. Sophie edged closer to me, her face pale. "How much does he owe you?" I asked. Marco named a figure that made my stomach drop. No wonder they'd been after my trust fund. "And if he doesn't pay?" Marco smiled thinly. "That would be unfortunate for everyone involved." I looked at Ian and Laurel, the fear in their eyes, the desperation. For a moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. They were trapped, just as I had been trapped in my grief and rage for weeks. But something shifted inside me. This wasn't justice. This was something darker, more dangerous than I'd intended. "I have a proposition," I said, the words forming before I'd fully thought them through. Marco raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "I can access funds," I said carefully. "Not the full amount, but enough to make a significant payment." Ian stared at me in disbelief. "Milena, what are you doing?" I ignored him. "In exchange, you let all of us walk out of here safely. Ian will pay the remainder on a schedule you agree to." "Milena, no," Sophie whispered urgently. Marco considered me thoughtfully. "Why would you help the man who betrayed you?" A question I was asking myself. I looked at Ian, the man I'd loved, the man I'd planned to spend my life with, and felt nothing but hollow emptiness. "I'm not helping him," I said. "I'm helping myself. I want this to be over." Marco nodded slowly. "A pragmatic woman. I appreciate that." He turned to one of his men. "Escort the ladies downstairs while Ian and I discuss terms." "No," I said firmly. "We all leave together, or no deal." Marco's eyes hardened. "You're not in a position to negotiate." "Neither are you," I countered, pulling out my phone. "Hotel security is right outside. One scream, one text, and this place will be swarming with police." A tense silence filled the room. I held Marco's gaze, my heart pounding, but my hand steady. Finally, he laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and perhaps respect. "Very well. Show me these funds you can access, and we'll discuss terms." I opened my banking app and showed him my account balance. Not my drained checking account, but my untouched emergency fund. Enough to buy us time, not enough to solve Ian's problems. As Marco examined the screen, I caught Sophie's eye. She gave me the slightest nod, and I knew she understood my plan. This wasn't surrender. This was strategy. And for the first time since my wedding night, I felt in control again. Marco's men escorted us through the hotel's service exit to avoid attention. The Italian sun beat down mercilessly as we walked to a black SUV parked in a secluded area of the lot. "The bank first," Marco instructed the driver. "Then we conclude our business." I sat between Sophie and Laurel in the back seat, Ian directly in front of me. Nobody spoke. The weight of what I was about to do pressed down on me like a physical force. At the bank, Marco accompanied me inside, while his men kept the others in the car. The cool air conditioning raised goosebumps on my arms as I approached the teller. "I'd like to make a withdrawal," I said, sliding my passport across the counter. Marco stood close enough to hear every word, but far enough to appear unconnected to me. The perfect predator, patient and watchful. The transaction took less than 10 minutes. I walked out with more cash than I'd ever held in my life, secured in an envelope inside my purse. Not enough to clear Ian's debt, but enough to buy us safety, for now. Back in the SUV, Marco examined the money, counting methodically. "A good faith payment," he said, nodding with satisfaction. Now, for the terms of repayment, he outlined a schedule that would keep Ian indebted for years. I barely listened, my focus on the phone in my lap, hidden by my purse. The text I'd sent from inside the bank had been simple. "Activate now." "Pull over here," Marco instructed the driver as we approached a quiet stretch of road overlooking the coast. My heart raced. This wasn't part of the plan. The SUV stopped. Marco turned to face us. "Before we conclude, there's the matter of interest on the late payments." Ian's face paled. "We had an agreement." "Agreements change when trust is broken," Marco said coldly. "You ran. You hid. Actions have consequences." My phone vibrated silently against my leg. A single message from Luca. "Done." "Check your phone," I said to Marco. He frowned. "Excuse me?" "Your phone. Check it." Suspicion flashed across his face, but curiosity won out. He pulled out his phone, his expression changing as he read whatever had just arrived. "What is this?" he demanded. "Evidence," I said calmly. "Financial records documenting every transaction between you and Ian. Wire transfers, cash deposits, loan terms that violate about a dozen international banking laws." Marco's face hardened. "You're bluffing. The Italian financial police don't think so. Neither does Interpol." I met his gaze steadily. "My colleague just sent them everything we've gathered over the past 3 weeks. They're particularly interested in your operations' connections to money laundering in Naples." The atmosphere in the car shifted instantly. Marco's men exchanged uneasy glances. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Marco said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Neither do you." I leaned forward. "I'm a financial analyst who specializes in tracking irregular patterns. The moment Ian told me about you, I started building a case. Every transaction, every shell company, every front business, I found them all." It wasn't entirely true. Luca had done much of the work, but the bluff hit its mark. Marco's confident facade cracked. "The money I just withdrew," I continued. "It's been photographed, documented, and reported to authorities as extortion payment. The bank's cameras have clear images of you accompanying me." Sophie stared at me in amazement. Ian looked stunned. Laurel's eyes were wide with disbelief. "Here's what happens next," I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "You let us go. You forget Ian's debt. In exchange, I don't personally make sure that every law enforcement agency in Europe knows exactly where to find you." Marco's laugh held no humor. "You think it's that simple? I think you're smart enough to recognize when the risk outweighs the reward." I held up my phone. "One call and everything goes to the prosecutors. Or you can walk away, find easier targets, and stay in business." The silence that followed seemed endless. I could hear my own heartbeat, feel Sophie's tension beside me. Finally, Marco nodded to the driver. "Stop the car." The SUV pulled over on a busy street corner. Marco turned to Ian. "Consider your debt cleared, not out of mercy, but because you're not worth the complications." His gaze shifted to me. "You, however, are someone I won't forget." "I'm counting on it," I replied. "That way you'll remember what happens if you come near any of us again." The door opened. Marco gestured for us to get out. Our business is concluded. We stepped onto the sidewalk, the SUV pulling away almost before the door closed behind us. For a moment, we all stood frozen, processing what had just happened. Ian was the first to speak. "Milena, I don't know what to say. You saved our lives." "I didn't do it for you." I turned to face him and Laurel. I did it because I refused to let your mistakes define the rest of my life. What happens now? Laurel asked, her voice small. Now? I looked at her, my sister, my betrayer, and felt the anger that had driven me for weeks finally begin to dissolve. Not into forgiveness, but into something like indifference. Now you get to live with what you've done, and I get to walk away. Just like that? Ian asked. No, not just like that. You're going to sign divorce papers that give me everything. You're going to repay every cent you took from me. And then you're going to disappear from my life forever. Sophie touched my arm. We should go. I nodded, but Laurel stepped forward. Milena, please, we're still family. No, I said quietly. We're not. Family doesn't do what you did to me. I saw the pain in her eyes, the realization that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. For a moment, I almost wavered, almost fell back into the pattern of being the understanding sister, the forgiving wife, but I was neither of those things anymore. Goodbye, Laurel, I said, turning away. Goodbye, Ian. Sophie and I walked toward the main street to find a taxi. Behind us, I could feel them watching, perhaps waiting for me to look back. I didn't. That was incredible, Sophie said as we rounded the corner. Terrifying, but incredible. Did Luca really send everything to Interpol? I smiled for what felt like the first time in months. No, but Marco doesn't know that. So the whole thing was a bluff? Not entirely. We do have the evidence. And if Marco comes after us, Luca will send it. But right now it's more valuable as leverage than as a police report. Sophie shook her head in amazement. When did you become so calculating, strategic, ruthless? I supplied. When I had to be. We reached the main square, bustling with tourists and locals enjoying the beautiful day. I stopped, taking in the scene, the blue sky, the colorful buildings, the laughter and life all around us. What now? Sophie asked. Back to Naples? Back to the States? I considered the question, feeling the weight of the past few weeks lifting from my shoulders. The revenge that had consumed me no longer seemed important. I'd faced my betrayers and walked away on my own terms. Now, I said, slipping my arm through hers, we enjoy Italy. We eat amazing food, drink excellent wine, and remember what it feels like to be happy. Sophie squeezed my arm. Sounds perfect. As we walked through the square, I realized something profound had shifted inside me. The woman who had been abandoned on her wedding night, broken, betrayed, consumed by vengeance, wasn't gone. She was still part of me, but she no longer controlled me. I had walked through fire and emerged not as someone new, but as myself, stronger, clearer, and finally free.
Hello, I'm Callie. I thought I was going on a healing trip with my sister and her friends, but they left me stranded in a tiny village in Provence. No phone, no wallet, no goodbye. At first, I thought it was just a bad joke. But then, emails were sent in my name, my job disappeared, and videos of me crying started showing up online. Was this really just a prank? Or had they planned to erase me all along? Why would your own family go this far to shut you out? They thought it would be funny. One big, harmless joke. A group prank I was too uptight to get. That's what they'd say later, if they ever bothered to say anything at all. I stood on the side of a narrow cobblestone road in Saint-Laurent-de-Lys, watching the taillights of the rented van flicker, then vanish down the hill like a bad punchline. The breeze carried lavender and dust. I stood there, blinking in disbelief, gripping the strap of my bag like it was the last anchor to the world I thought I knew. They'll be back, I told myself out loud. 5 minutes, 10, but the minutes stacked like bricks in my throat. Nothing but quiet, the clink of cutlery from an outdoor cafe, and polite but puzzled glances from locals who didn't speak English. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve and pointed at me. I managed a stiff smile. My hands were already sweating. I checked my phone. Dead. Of course it was. No charger, no adapter. Monica had promised she packed the backup. You always overthink everything, she'd said, rolling her eyes at me as she shoved clothes into her pink monogrammed suitcase. I hadn't replied. I reached into my purse. Wallet? Gone. Probably left in the van, tucked into the seat pocket with my sunglasses. I counted the cash in my side pouch, 83 euros and some change. That's all I had. And then it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. They meant to leave me. 2 nights earlier, we'd had dinner at a vineyard just outside Aix. It was supposed to be the healing moment of the trip. Monica toasted to new beginnings, while Dylan kept topping off everyone's wine. The table laughed a little too hard when I declined my third glass. You're still in divorce mode, huh? Monica said, loud enough for the waiter to glance over. Girl, it's a trip. You can't mess this one up, too. I remember pushing my chair back quietly, muttering something about needing air. I waited for someone, anyone, to come check on me. No one did. I should have known then. I think I did. The sun was dropping lower now. I wandered through the village, heart pounding, unsure if I was walking toward help or just trying to look less abandoned. Everything felt surreal, too picturesque to hold something so cruel. The bakeries were closing, the shops dimming. No familiar signs, no tourists. A narrow alley led me to a bakery. The windows were foggy with warmth, and the smell of butter hit me like a memory I couldn't place. Inside, an older woman in a flour-dusted apron stood behind the counter. She looked up and paused when she saw my face. Her eyes softened. No English, but kindness doesn't always need translation. She pointed to a wooden chair and the wall outlet. I smiled. A crack of hope. I plugged my phone in, but nothing happened. Wrong voltage, wrong adapter, wrong continent. I don't know what showed on my face, but the woman, Martha, I'd learn later, crossed the room and rested a hand on my shoulder. A wordless gesture. Gentle. It nearly broke me. I stared at the useless charger and felt the grief settle. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and sharp, like realizing you've been talking to an empty room. Like waking up and knowing you were never the favorite child. This wasn't a petty prank. It was something else. A purge. A deliberate forgetting. They didn't want me to come back. Not to Boston. Not to them. Not to anything that reminded them I existed outside their curated lives. I came here to heal. To reset after a divorce that unstitched a decade of my life. And now, I'd been discarded like luggage that didn't match the aesthetic. Fine. If they meant to scare me, it worked. But now I was just angry. At some point in the night, I must have fallen asleep sitting up. My neck ached, and the hard chair beneath me had left lines across my thighs. Outside the bakery window, morning had settled in, soft golden light spilling onto the cobblestones, the scent of rising bread warming the air like a blanket. Martha appeared from the back room, holding a tangled knot of cords and plugs. Her fingers fumbled through them until she pulled out something old and slightly yellowed. She held it out to me with a hopeful look and gestured toward my phone. It was a UK adapter, the kind people forget in rental flats and never return for. Try this, she said, in heavily accented English. A rare gift, 2 words I didn't expect. I thanked her, plugged it in, and waited. The screen blinked once. Then again. A low buzz. Battery, 1%. Enough to flicker to life. Not enough for anything else. I tapped the power button, praying. Before I could open a single app, the screen lit up with an incoming call. Reed. I hadn't seen that name in months. The name alone made my chest go tight. The bakery around me blurred for a second, like someone had yanked me back across the ocean. My thumb hovered over decline, but something made me answer. Hello? His voice came through clear, smooth, like it always had, like nothing had happened. Callie, he said. Finally. I didn't speak. He filled the silence fast. Your mom's worried. I mean, really worried. Monica called me in tears. Liar. Monica hadn't shed a tear in a decade unless it was for a photo. You just disappeared, he continued, as if I hadn't been dumped in another country like forgotten luggage. You always do this. Shut down. Vanish when it gets hard. I didn't vanish, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I was left. He sighed, like I was a child who still didn't get the lesson. Look, maybe the timing was off, but everyone's under stress. You have to stop taking everything so personally. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, heart thudding. I knew this dance. Reed never yelled. He was never the villain. Just endlessly, reasonable, calm, always angling the mirror to show your own reflection and ask what's wrong with you. I talked to your mom again, he said casually. She's devastated. Your dad doesn't even know where you are. Do you realize how selfish this looks? I didn't ask for any of this. No, he said, a beat too quick, but you sure know how to make it about you. There it was, the real tone, polite on the surface, poison underneath. You need to come home, Callie. You're not going to fix anything out there. You can't heal surrounded by strangers and whatever it is you think you're doing. I stayed silent. Every word he said pressed on old bruises. Then came the line that snapped everything. I know Provence isn't ideal, but maybe you'll come back a little clearer, a little cleaner. Cleaner? I froze. I hadn't told anyone where I was, not even the village name. I hadn't tagged a location, hadn't posted anything. But Reed knew. He didn't say it like a guess. He said it like he'd seen it. That call wasn't concern. It was surveillance in disguise. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I just said, "Goodbye, Reed," and hung up. I sat there for a long time, breathing shallow, letting it wash through me. Then I stood and walked to the bakery's doorway. Outside, the sun lit up a distant row of olive trees that stretched like arms into the hills. Quiet, steady, rooted. I'm not your mess to clean up, I whispered. Not anymore. I didn't sleep much that night. The phone call with Reed had frayed every nerve, and even the comforting scent of yeast and sugar drifting in from the bakery couldn't calm the static inside my chest. By morning, I needed to move. Sitting still made me feel hunted. The village market stretched along the main square, woven with bright umbrellas and wooden crates stacked with tomatoes, peaches, and bottles of olive oil. I didn't have a plan, only the urge to look normal, blend in, browse, pretend I belonged. I picked up a small basket and wandered between the stalls, grabbing a loaf of crusty bread, a handful of apricots, and a bottle of water. I was reaching for a bunch of thyme when someone bumped into me hard enough to jostle my bag. "Oh, I'm so sorry," a woman said, her voice too cheerful. She had shoulder-length hair the color of honey and sunglasses perched on her head, though the day was cloudy. She smiled like we were old friends. "Callie, right?" I froze. My name hadn't passed a stranger's lips since I landed in France. I didn't know this woman. I searched her face for a flicker of recognition, but there was none. Only that smooth, curated smile. "Didn't we meet at that vineyard tour in Avignon?" she offered, tilting her head. "Or maybe you're friends with Monica?" My stomach clenched. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Every instinct screamed that something was off. Before I could ask her anything, where she was from, who she knew, she smiled wider and disappeared into the crowd with a breezy, "Take care!" I stood there for a full minute, clutching my basket like a shield. Then I walked away, slowly, then faster. How did she know my name? The question rang louder than any bell tower. Back at the bakery, I ducked into the rear room where Martha stored flour and cleaned vegetables. She looked up from peeling carrots and gave me that same steady glance I was beginning to rely on. I offered a nod, silent reassurance that I was okay. Sort of. Once I connected to the bakery's patchy Wi-Fi, my phone pinged with delayed notifications. I opened my email. Among the spam and subscription newsletters was a single message from my mother. Subject line, from Homebody. "Sweetheart, Monica told us you're not well. If you need help, please don't shut us out again. We're all worried. This behavior isn't like you. My hands tightened around the phone. So that was the angle now. I wasn't just lost. I was unstable. The same storyline they had fed our family years ago when I cried through my first miscarriage, when I stopped smiling after the divorce. Monica had always known how to play the part, the capable one, the fixer. She'd walk into a room with her shiny hair and flawless posture and say things like, "She just needs space," or "It's a lot for her right now." But what she really meant was, "Don't believe her. Believe me." I remembered a Christmas years ago, sitting at the dinner table, trying to explain to my parents that Reed had cut me out of our joint accounts. Monica had laughed. "That's not abuse, Callie. It's marriage. Grow up." And they'd nodded. Because Monica always sounded more reasonable. My eyes burned as I walked behind the bakery, past a row of potted herbs, into the clearing beyond. I sank to the ground. This wasn't just about being stranded. It was about being rewritten. Again. Recast as the emotional one. The problem. The version of me that Monica could manage, contain, dismiss. I tilted my head toward the sky, blinking hard. "They've got the script," I muttered. "They just needed me to vanish so they could narrate it." I stayed there for a while, letting the quiet press into me, letting the rage cool and crystallize. Then I wiped my face with my sleeve, stood up, and walked back through the alleyway. I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't broken. And if they wanted a version of me, they could explain away. They were about to meet the one they couldn't. The words came easily once I stopped trying to soften them. It was past midnight. The bakery had gone silent. Martha had long since gone upstairs, and I sat in the back office with the lights dimmed and my laptop screen the only glow in the room. The email cursor blinked like a dare. Subject line, "You don't get to define me, Monica. You left me on a curb in a country I barely speak the language of. No warning, no explanation, just laughter fading behind a slammed van door." I paused, then continued. "I spent the first hour thinking it was a joke, the second hoping it was a test. By hour 3, I understood it was neither." Each sentence dropped like a stone. There was no venom, just the weight of truth. I'm not writing this for an apology. I know better. I'm writing because you've spent years rewriting my life in your words. Not this time. I ended with, "You don't get to define me anymore." And then, I hit send. The email didn't make me feel lighter. It didn't bring closure or triumph. It just made something still. Like I had finally shut a door and locked it from the inside. I slept for 3 hours. When I woke, it was to the scent of cinnamon and apricots and the faint vibration of my phone. New message, Monica. "OMG, you're okay. So relieved. I told Mom you probably just needed time to breathe. Everyone kinda panicked, LOL. Hopefully we'll laugh about this someday." Emoji, heart, sparkle, butterfly. I stared at the screen like it had teeth. There was no apology, no mention of what happened. Just bubble-wrapped condescension and a thin layer of performance. She wasn't acknowledging the harm. She was preparing the story for everyone else. The good sister who held it all together. The broken one who ran off. That same tired script. I didn't respond. Instead, I took out the notebook Martha had given me when I first arrived. I hadn't written in it until now. I turned to a blank page and in big letters I wrote, "Who I am." Then underneath, not Monica's version, not Reed's ex-wife, not someone who needs managing, not broken, not missing, not yours. I filled 3 more pages. I didn't stop to edit or second guess. I just let it pour out. Everything I'd traded away for peace, for approval, for silence. The sun was climbing when I finally came out front. Martha stood by the counter kneading dough, humming something low. She glanced up as I passed and said, "You have stronger eyes today." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She smiled gently, pointed to her face. "Before, your eyes were heavy. Today, sharp." I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded. "Thanks. I think I needed someone to say that." Later that afternoon, I wandered into town again. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. My steps felt different, grounded. I passed the bookstore, the wine shop. I looked at the world with a sense of space, of choice. Monica's email hadn't rattled me. It had confirmed everything I already knew. But by sunset, I would learn Monica and Reed had already taken something else from me. It started with a scroll. I was sitting in the back courtyard behind the bakery, feet up on a cracked bench, soft golden light filtering through grapevines above. I hadn't planned to check my old email. That account had become a graveyard. Expired coupons, forgotten subscriptions, the occasional spam from a wellness blog I didn't remember subscribing to. But something made me open it. The inbox loaded slow, and then there it was. 5 messages stacked one after the other, all from Dana, my former design mentor. My lifeline when I was still figuring out where creativity ended and survival began. The first was dated 2 months ago. Callie, hope you're well. I've got a remote project I think you'd be perfect for. Eco-architecture, flexible hours, full autonomy. Let me know if you're interested. My throat tightened. The next email was a gentle follow-up. Then another. The fourth was shorter. I didn't hear back, so assuming it's a pass. And then came the fifth, forwarded. Below it, a line chilled my blood. Thanks for thinking of me, but I've moved on from design. Best of luck. It was from my account. I never sent it. My hands trembled as I reread the message. It was polite, neutral, just enough distance to make it seem final. But I knew that tone. It wasn't mine. It was Reed's. Years ago, he'd helped me simplify by merging our logins, linking accounts, taking little things off my plate. He said I needed to focus on healing. He said it with that voice he used when he didn't want me to argue. I'd nodded. Back then, nodding was easier. Now I saw it for what it was. Control. They hadn't just stranded me in Provence. They'd sabotaged the one thing that could have brought me back to life, my work. Martha found me moments later, hunched over the table, breath shallow. She sat without asking, and waited while I typed frantically into Google Translate. I turned the screen to her. This, I said. This is what they took. She read the translation, blinked slowly, then said in her soft accent, They want you small. I didn't answer. She reached over, tapped the center of my chest with 2 fingers. You are not small. Something cracked open in me. Not with a scream, not with a sob. It was a quiet, burning clarity. I went inside and pulled out my notebook. I drew a line down the middle of the page. Left side, what they've taken, my wallet, my location, my voice, my career. Right side, what I still have, my mind, my hands, my memory, my truth. At the bottom, I wrote, what they never expected. I kept the receipts. By nightfall, I had created a new email account, something clean, something untainted. I drafted a message to Dana. Subject. That wasn't me. Body. Hi Dana, I just saw your messages and wanted you to know. I never replied. Someone else did. I'm still here, still designing, still interested. Attaching a fresh portfolio, some old pieces, some new sketches. Nothing polished but honest. I hesitated for a moment, then clicked send. It wasn't about getting the job. It was about reclaiming the door they tried to seal shut behind me. It was late, the kind of late where even the crickets had gone quiet. The air outside was heavy with the scent of lavender and cooling stone. I'd just finished dinner with Martha. Bread, goat cheese, tomatoes still warm from the sun. My hands still smelled of basil. The message was from Harper. Harper, a friend from back home. More of a former colleague now. We hadn't spoken since the divorce. Hey, is this really you? There was a link. My stomach dropped. I tapped it. The screen loaded. TikTok. The username, @DylanDoesTruth. The video opened with shaky footage. Me, sitting on the curb outside the cafe where they'd left me. My face streaked with sweat and mascara. Eyes darting. Voice too soft to hear. Then a quick cut to me, walking aimlessly through the village. Shoulders slumped, lips moving like I was talking to myself. Overlay text. Sometimes you just can't save people from themselves. Cut to Dylan's voice, spliced from somewhere else. We tried. We really did. But she wasn't well. You can't force someone to want help. Background music. Soft, haunting piano. The comment section was worse. Yikes. Poor Monica, dealing with this kind of drama. This girl needs serious help. You can see it in her eyes. She's gone. I dropped the phone. It clattered against the stone floor, the video still playing. I wasn't just being erased, I was being rewritten. My rage didn't come in a scream. It came as stillness, focus. I picked up the phone, walked to the far end of the courtyard, and sat on the step by the herb garden. Then I opened my camera roll. Months ago, at the vineyard dinner, the night Monica mocked my divorce, I'd filmed a short clip. The lighting was low, but the audio was sharp. Dylan slurring his words, Monica rolling her eyes, someone whispering, "She's not gonna last the whole trip." I uploaded it to my laptop, clipped out a 10-second section, overlaid it with a single sentence. Full context is coming. Then I paused. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth. So I opened a blank document. I began typing what really happened. The timeline. The night at the vineyard. The fight. The van. The bakery. The stolen job. The email I never sent. I backed it up with dates, screenshots, journal pages, faces, words, context. Then I turned to Martha, who was watching from the doorway, arms crossed over her apron. "I need to say something," I told her, "but it has to be in French." She nodded, disappeared, then returned with a pen and a notepad. We worked on it together. "No one has the right to erase your voice." She underlined it, then smiled. By midnight, I had posted a new video. No music, no filter. Just me, sitting in the courtyard, reading my letter. First in French, then in English. I didn't cry. I didn't blink too much. I looked into the lens like I was speaking to the person who mattered most. Myself. The caption read, "They took the narrative. I'm taking it back." I turned off the phone. They didn't back down, so I didn't either. The next morning came quietly. Too quietly. The usual hum of the village waking up felt muted. Or maybe it was just me. My nerves, raw after the post, were pulling at the edges of every sound. I hadn't slept. Not really. I'd turned the phone off after hitting publish, but my mind kept spinning. I was in the middle of folding fresh linens when my inbox pinged. Dana. Subject, need to talk. Urgent. Her message was short. "Hey Callie, quick heads up. Someone reached out to our team last week claiming to be your legal representative. They submitted a portfolio under your name. The work looks like yours. Just tweaked. Watermarked by a company I've never heard of. It felt off. Thought I'd check." My heart stopped. Attached was a JPEG. I opened it. It was mine, my design. The rustic modern cafe concept I'd sketched after the divorce. My layout, my palette, even the same notes about repurposed wood and natural light. But my name was gone. In its place, a slick new logo, Vantage Studio. A company I didn't know, a watermark I didn't create. My blood went cold. They hadn't just tried to discredit me online. They were trying to be me. I immediately dialed Dana. Her voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the hesitation. "I thought it was strange," she said, so I asked for credentials. The reply came from a man named R. Davis. Said he was your brother-in-law and had power of attorney. I sat down. Hard. Reed. Of course it was Reed. "Did he send anything else?" I asked. Dana hesitated. "Yeah, a signed release. Digital. Looked official." I closed my eyes, jaw tight. I never signed anything. And I hadn't. Not a release. Not a waiver. Nothing. But years ago, Reed had helped clean up my digital life after the marriage started falling apart. He had my old passwords, my digital signature stored on our joint drive. He'd used it. They were using me as their ghost designer. I hung up and paced the courtyard in front of the farmhouse. I could hear Martha inside humming, the scent of orange zest drifting from the kitchen window. I pulled up my Google Drive, frantically typing keywords. Found it. My original cafe design file. Time-stamped. Metadata intact. The layers, the process. A digital fingerprint. Proof. I brought my laptop into the local cafe, where the owner, Lucian, spoke good English. Between his spotty legal knowledge and my translator app, we crafted a cease and desist letter. I forwarded it to Dana along with the metadata and a new digital signature. Subject line, "This is mine." She responded in minutes. "Got it, this helps. I'm pulling back from the other submission." For a moment, I just sat there, hands shaking, staring at the screen. They hadn't just stranded me. They'd tried to build their future with the blueprints of my pain. That night, as the sun fell behind the hills, I sat on the porch with Martha. She brought out 2 mugs of tea and a blanket. We didn't speak much. I watched the olive trees sway and whispered. They tried to bury me with my own roots, but I still have the seeds. She didn't ask what I meant. She just reached over and placed a notepad on the armrest beside me. At the top, she'd written in careful script, "Cabinet d'Avocats, Paris." A law firm. Her eyes met mine, steady. Tomorrow I'd call them. But for now, I sat still, not silenced, not erased, just ready. The letter was taped right below the iron latch, flapping gently in the morning breeze. Martha spotted it first when she stepped out with her basket of herbs. She didn't open it, just walked back in and handed it to me like it was a bomb. No name, no return address. The envelope wasn't sealed, just folded neatly, like whoever delivered it wanted speed over formality. Inside was 1 sheet of printer paper, no letterhead, just 12 words. "Leave this alone. You've made your point. Don't push it further." I stared at it for a full minute, before I realized I was gripping it so tightly my knuckles had gone white. It wasn't signed. Of course it wasn't. But I knew the voice behind those keys. It was the same one that always smiled too wide when I called out the truth. The same tone Reed used when he said, "Let's not make this messy." Martha looked at me, puzzled. "Bad news." I handed it over, then pulled out my phone and translated aloud. She read it twice, then met my eyes and shrugged. "Good, now they are scared." I laughed once, sharp. "That's supposed to scare me." She tilted her head. "It only works if you're not already mad." I folded the paper and slipped it into the side pocket of my notebook. No shredding, no burning. I wanted a record of every threat dressed as politeness. I went inside and opened my laptop. 1 folder, labeled Proof. Inside, every timeline I'd built, every screenshot from Dana, the forged email headers, metadata files from my original sketches, a copy of the video Reed edited, a screenshot of the message from Dylan, the legal release with my digital signature, plus my original file showing I'd never authorized anything. I clicked Share and sent the entire drive to 2 email addresses. legal@harrowandlentz.fr, Paris law firm Martha had helped me find. candice.wu@nylawpro.com, Dana's referral. I added a short note. I don't want to sue them yet, but I want the facts to exist somewhere besides my head. If they come again, I won't be unprepared. I hit send and leaned back, watching the blue bar crawl across the screen until it confirmed. Delivered. By mid-afternoon, the nerves had settled into a steady hum of focus. I took a walk through the village, passing the narrow alleyway that led to the courtyard. I stopped for a moment outside the tiny bookstore and watched a young couple inside pick out postcards. They laughed together, touched shoulders. That used to be me and Reed once, before the silencing, the reshaping, the rewrites. I walked on. Later that night, I sat at the bakery's kitchen table with my laptop open again. There was one more thing to do. I opened a new message. No subject. To Monica Davis, I didn't start with "Hi." I didn't start with "Dear." I just wrote, "This stops here." Not because you asked, but because I say so. That was it. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. I hit send. Then I closed the laptop and exhaled. It wasn't over, not legally, not emotionally. But the part where they got to write my story? That part was done. I curled up on the little couch near the window, watching the moon rise over the olive trees. This place, the one they thought would break me, had become my mirror. Not of who I used to be, but of who I refused to stop becoming. I didn't win back everything I'd lost, but I reclaimed the only thing that ever really mattered: myself. The morning after the letter, I brewed tea without rushing. The air had shifted. It wasn't lighter, not yet. But it wasn't crushing me anymore either. The first email came from Dana. "We've submitted the formal complaint. The Paris team confirmed a few irregularities in the submission documents, names and sign-offs being flagged. Just wanted you to know, it's in motion." I didn't reply right away. Just sat with the weight of it. Not fear, finality. A few hours later, another message came in. "Dylan's video has been taken down across all channels. No statement. Just gone. Not an apology, not even an acknowledgement. But it was something. I didn't need their guilt. I didn't even need the court to agree with me, though I hoped it would. I just needed the paper trail to exist. I needed the truth where it couldn't be rewritten anymore. That was done. By the end of that week, I was officially onboarded as a remote consultant for Dana's firm. The work was sporadic, mostly layout concepts and mood boards. But every email, every assignment felt like a stitch in my own skin, being sewn back with my own hands. I also started contributing to a local blog in Provence, an English-language lifestyle site that spotlighted creative expats. My first piece? Designing in Silence. How leaving Boston gave me back my voice. Martha printed it out and taped it behind the register. In return, I helped her digitize her menu. We sat for hours one evening, translating pastry names and adjusting font sizes. She called it Très Modern, and when the screen blinked to life with a sample menu, she clapped like I'd performed a magic trick. I was still here, and I was building something real. One crisp morning, just as the scent of warm figs filled the bakery's courtyard, Jacques from the hardware shop dropped by. "I hear you're good with design," he said, cradling a basket of olives. "We need someone to help with signs for the harvest route." Then he paused. "Also, we could use an extra hand picking, if you're not too busy." I smiled. I have two hands and nowhere else to be. That weekend, I stood barefoot in the middle of an olive grove, mud streaking my arms, my laugh echoing louder than I expected. There was no stage, no filter, just me and the trees and a basket that kept tipping sideways. No one asked me about Monica, or Reed, or Boston. And I didn't offer, not out of secrecy, but because, for the first time, they weren't the loudest thing in my life anymore. One evening, I returned to the bench outside the bakery, the same one where I'd once sat stunned and silent, trying to understand how people who claimed to love me could vanish like that. I pulled out my journal and wrote, "That version of me would never believe we made it here." Then I added a line underneath. "Some roots get ripped out. Some get replanted. I'm both." I closed the notebook and stared at the hills, the trees catching the last light of day. Before bed, I checked my email one last time. A single unread message. From Monica Davis, subject, "None. I hope you're well. Maybe someday we can talk." I didn't delete it. I didn't respond either. Instead, I placed my phone face down, turned off the light, and slipped into sleep with the windows open. The wind moved gently through the olive branches, like a breath I could finally exhale. I wasn't healed completely. I didn't need to be. But I was whole enough to keep walking forward, on ground I had chosen. Maybe I'll tell the full story someday. But for now, I have bread to bake and sketches to finish. And that's more than enough. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most aren't strangers. They're the ones who shared your childhood, your holidays, your home. And when they rewrite your story to make themselves look better, It can feel like you've lost everything: your voice, your worth, your truth. But here's what I've learned. You don't have to stay silent to keep the peace. You don't have to keep shrinking so others feel bigger. And you don't have to wait for permission to take your life back. For a long time, I thought healing meant going back to who I was. But now I know. It means becoming who I was never allowed to be. So if you've ever felt erased, abandoned, or made to feel like you were too much or not enough, I want you to know you are not alone, and you are not broken. You are becoming. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what they feared most. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to rebuild from a betrayal? Did this story remind you of something you've lived through? Or still trying to rise above? If this video touched something in you, drop A or just type 1 in the comments. And if it didn't resonate with you, that's okay too. Let me know what didn't click. I genuinely want to grow with this community. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thanks for being here. You matter. Hi there, I'm Hillary Marlowe. You know, not every family throws you out because you refuse to take care of their pet. Mine did. The night my sister yelled, "Get out of my sight!" I thought that was the worst of it. But it wasn't. That was just the start of something darker. They didn't just want me gone. They rewrote the story, made me the villain, drained everything I'd ever worked for. They signed papers behind my back, erased my name, and smiled for the cameras while they did it. And you know what's worse? I kept asking myself, how far can your own family go before you finally break? The Marlowe estate always smelled like roses and old money. That night in June 2015, it felt more like a prison. Chandelier lights too bright, marble floors too cold, the air too heavy to breathe. I stood at the edge of the grand foyer, the stage for every flawless family dinner we ever staged for the world. Behind closed doors, though, we were anything but flawless. Astrid moved across the room like she owned it, because in a way, she did. She'd always been the favorite, the star, the one who sparkled under our parents' gaze. I was the flaw in the frame, the one they wished they could airbrush out. Dinner was over. Our parents had vanished upstairs. Only Astrid and I remained, silence stretching thin between us like something ready to snap. She folded her arms, her perfect smile gone. "You're gonna take care of my cat, Hillary. That's not a request." I blinked at her. "You can't be serious." She stepped closer, voice cold despite the thick Texas air. "I messed up, and if the press finds out Mr. Coleman's cat got sick under my watch, it'll be everywhere tomorrow, so you'll take the blame. Make it look like you were the one responsible." I shook my head. "Number, I'm not covering for you. Not this time." For a second, her face cracked. Then it hardened. "You ungrateful brat. You think you're better than me? After everything Mom and Dad gave you?" My throat tightened, but I stood my ground. "I won't lie for you." Her voice rose, sharp and final. "Get out of my sight. You're no longer part of this family." The words hit like a slap, and before I could reply, our mother's voice floated from the top of the staircase. "Maybe it's for the best," Corinne said coolly, swirling wine in her glass. "You've always been a burden." That was the part that gutted me, not Astrid's cruelty, but how easily our mother agreed. I didn't say a word. I grabbed my old backpack, already half-packed with what little was mine. My father stood by the fireplace, eyes fixed on the flames, not even glancing my way. I waited for him to speak. He didn't. As I reached the door, Astrid called out one last time, "Sugar sweet. Good luck out there, sweetheart. The world's gonna eat you alive." Outside, the night air hit me like a slap, hot and heavy. I walked without looking back, the mansion glowing behind me like a bad joke. By the time I reached the bus stop downtown, it was past midnight. I sat on a cold bench, backpack at my feet, everything finally sinking in. I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. At first, I ignored it. When I finally checked, the headlines were everywhere. Marlowe heiress abandons dying animal. A daughter's betrayal. They'd rewritten the story overnight. The family PR machine had spun it perfectly. I was the heartless daughter who walked out on a helpless cat and a loving family. Photos of me everywhere, paired with comments like, "What a monster! Typical spoiled meltdown. She's cold." No one asked why I left. No one wanted the truth. I spent the day wandering Dallas in a fog, watching strangers' reflections in cafe windows, seeing the villain they'd made me into staring back. By evening, I found myself on an overpass, staring at the freeway lights bleeding into the dark horizon. That was when I understood what it meant to be erased. The sky shifted overhead, streetlights flickering like the universe couldn't decide whether to leave me in the dark or drag me back to the light. I slipped my phone into my pocket and whispered into the empty night, "They think they've buried me, but they'll regret it." That sentence became my armor. For months, it was the only thing holding me together. A year had passed since the night I walked away from the Marlowe estate with nothing but an old backpack and my name. By summer 2016, I'd stitched together a fragile life in South Dallas, a rented room above Mara's diner, grease-stained uniforms, aching feet from double shifts. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I didn't belong to them anymore. Most nights, I closed up the diner past midnight, wiping counters while the neon sign outside flickered like it might give out. Sometimes Mara would leave a note beside a slice of pie. "Keep going, kiddo. You're tougher than they think." I needed that reminder more than she knew. One Tuesday night, as the last customer shuffled out, Mara handed me an envelope. "Some official-looking thing for you," she said casually. "From the court." My stomach dropped the second I saw it, cream-colored, stamped with the state seal. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, envelope heavy in my hands. When I finally opened it, the words punched me square in the chest. Notice of liability. Animal welfare, case number 15-7021. My name was there, not as a witness, as the legal guardian. Legal guardian, Hillary Marlowe. I read it twice. 3 times. At the bottom, my signature, supposedly mine, accepting responsibility for Astrid's cat during an open investigation. The same case she tried to dump on me the night they cut me loose, but I never signed anything. Attached were more documents, fabricated statements, fake witness reports, all twisting me into the villain. I sat there shaking, my mother's voice echoing in my head. "You've always been a burden." And now they weren't just erasing me, they were rewriting me into their lies. The next few days passed in a blur. I showed up at the diner, smiled at customers, poured coffee like nothing was wrong. But something inside me cracked. Friday night, Mara found me zoning out at the register. "You okay, sweetheart?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile. "Something like that." When I got back upstairs, a small envelope sat wedged under my door. No return address. Inside, a typed note. "Stay silent, or everyone will know who you really are." And a USB drive. My stomach twisted as I plugged it into my laptop. The video was grainy, shaky footage of me, or someone who looked like me, yelling at a cat. But the voice was off. The movements unnatural. Edited, faked. At the end, a caption in bold white letters. "Hillary Marlowe caught on camera abusing a helpless animal." My blood ran cold. They weren't finished with me. They were building a story so rotten, so convincing, no one would ever question it. I slammed the laptop shut, heart pounding like it might break free from my chest. The next few nights, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Astrid's voice, fake sweet and sharp. Saw my mother's cool stare. Felt the chains they kept tightening around me, even from miles away. But I kept showing up to work, because bills don't wait for your world to fall apart. One night, long after closing, I sat alone at the diner counter, neon light buzzing outside, the weight of everything pressing down. I pulled the court letter and the USB from my bag, staring at them like they might catch fire. For a year, I'd tried to disappear, to build something of my own. but they wouldn't let me. I pressed my forehead against the cool tabletop, breath shaking. Tears threatened, but I didn't let them fall. Instead, I whispered into the empty diner, voice sharp as steel. "You want war? You'll get it." That night, after whispering those words into the empty diner, I climbed the stairs, crawled into my narrow bed, and stared at the ceiling until morning. I had no plan, no power, just a fragile spark of defiance burning in my chest. The months that followed weren't pretty. They were survival. I kept my head down, worked double shifts, scraped together enough to enroll in night classes. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. If they wanted to break me, I was determined to make myself unbreakable. By spring 2017, my life looked almost normal from the outside. I earned my GED. I saved every spare dollar. And finally, I signed a lease on a small storefront on Polk Street, a pet care shop, fittingly ironic after how they'd weaponized a sick cat to ruin me. By day, I stocked shelves and rang up customers. By night, I sat in the back booth at Mara's Diner, flipping through business textbooks and contract law. Little by little, I built something that was mine. Until one phone call shattered everything. It was a Thursday evening in late May. I had just locked up the shop and was about to head back to my apartment when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but instinct made me answer. "Miss Marlowe?" A crisp, unfamiliar voice. "This is James Henley. I represent your family." My stomach tightened. "I have unfortunate news," he continued smoothly. "Your mother is gravely ill. She's requested to see you." I didn't respond. The words felt scripted, like every lie I'd grown up hearing. "She's in critical condition," he added. "It would mean the world to her if you'd visit." Against my better judgment, I said yes. Maybe some part of me still hoped she had a heart buried beneath the ice. The next evening, I stood once more at the towering white walls of the Marlowe estate. Everything looked the same. The polished floors, the sterile perfection. But I wasn't the same girl who'd walked away 2 years ago. The housekeeper led me upstairs in silence. My mother lay in bed, pale and thin, wires and monitors surrounding her. "Look who finally showed up," she rasped, her voice brittle but sharp. She reached for my hand, her skin cold. "Hillary, I made mistakes, but you're still my daughter." Her eyes filled with tears. She spoke of regret, of wanting to make things right. I wanted to believe her. When she slid a stack of documents toward me, "Just routine, in case something happens," I hesitated. But her hand trembled, and guilt outweighed suspicion. I signed. Weeks passed. She recovered. Quickly, almost miraculously. By summer, the machines disappeared, her color returned, and the concern in her voice faded like it had never existed. Then came the letter. Notice of asset transfer. My signature at the bottom. According to the documents, I had voluntarily handed over the only inheritance I'd quietly clung to, my grandmother's trust fund. It now belonged to Corinne Marlowe for management purposes. My pulse roared in my ears. She wasn't dying, she never was. I'd been played. Again. But they didn't stop there. A few days later, Mara walked into my shop after closing, an envelope in her hand and something heavy in her eyes. "You should see this," she said quietly. Inside, a formal notice from the Dallas Scholarship Board. Scholarship withdrawn due to loss of funding. It wasn't addressed to me. It was for Lila, Mara's daughter, the girl who'd worked beside me at the diner, who called me her big sister, who dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. The donor who pulled the funding, Gareth Marlowe. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. They hadn't just come for me. Now they were hurting the people who stood by me. That night, I sat outside the diner, staring at the dark sky while Mara sat beside me in silence. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. After a long stretch of quiet, I finally spoke. "They can tear down everything around me, but I'll never let them break me." That night outside Mara's diner, I made myself a promise. I kept it tucked close to my chest like a secret weapon, something I'd whisper to myself whenever the weight of the past threatened to crush me. 2 years passed. Dallas changed, but the ghost of my family's shadow never quite left me. By 2019, I had done what they said I never could. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something of my own. SafePaw had grown from a dusty storefront to a recognizable brand. We'd just signed our first national deal with PetMart, one of the largest pet store chains in Texas. The ink was barely dry when I found myself sitting in a sleek boardroom on the 20th floor of an office building downtown, surrounded by suits and smiles. That afternoon, we finalized the terms. My lawyer shook my hand. The marketing team congratulated me. "You did it, Hillary," they said. "You're the real deal." For the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe it. After the meeting, I walked outside into the crisp autumn air, phone buzzing in my bag. I figured it was Mara or one of the staff, probably checking in. When I finally pulled it out, I froze. 34 missed calls, dozens of texts, and a string of news notifications lighting up my screen. Astrid Marlowe makes shocking family revelation on national TV. Marlowe heiress accuses estranged sister of animal cruelty. Hillary Marlowe, the sister who abandoned everything. My stomach dropped. I unlocked one of the video links. There she was, Astrid, sitting across from a morning talk show host, perfectly styled, smiling sweetly like she hadn't been sharpening knives behind that grin for years. "Some people pretend to care about animals," she said, voice dripping with that signature fake innocence, "but can't even keep their own life together. My family tried everything to help her, but some people just want to watch the world burn." The audience laughed politely. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My phone kept vibrating as social media exploded with comments, retweets, hashtags, people dissecting my name, my life, my past. Pictures of me from years ago resurfaced. The worst ones, the ones my mother's PR team always kept on standby. By the time I made it back to SafePaw's office, my inbox was flooded. Waiting for me at the top of the pile was an email from PetMart's corporate office. Subject: Contract suspension. I clicked, my pulse racing. Due to unforeseen public concerns regarding Ms. Hillary Marlowe's personal history, we regret to inform you that our partnership is suspended until further notice. My legs buckled beneath me. I sank into the nearest chair, reading the message over and over, hoping I'd somehow misunderstood. But the words didn't change. Everything I'd worked for, the years of grinding, of bleeding for every inch forward, shattered in a matter of minutes, because my sister knew how to pull strings and smile for the camera. That evening, I sat in the corner of my apartment, the TV playing on mute, replaying Astrid's interview like a nightmare on loop. I could still hear her voice. My sister chose to walk away. She never cared about family. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to disappear. Instead, I sat there frozen, watching the headlines scroll across the screen, feeling the walls close in. They had dragged my name through the mud for the last time. That night, those words played on repeat inside my head like a war drum. I didn't sleep, couldn't. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table until dawn, staring at the empty contract from PetMart and the headlines still lighting up my phone. The following months weren't easy. Cleaning up the damage Astrid caused took everything I had left. I spent days in crisis meetings with my staff, assuring them we weren't going under. Nights were filled with damage control calls, PR statements, and endless apologetic emails to clients who were now hesitant to associate with my name. But slowly, piece by piece, I rebuilt. SafePaw was dented, but still breathing. So was I. By January 2020, I thought maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind me. That illusion shattered on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday. It was late afternoon when the knock came. I was in my office, reviewing inventory reports, the faint hum of traffic outside blending with the low chatter of my employees in the next room. When I opened the door, a man in a gray suit handed me a thick envelope, nodded politely, and walked away without a word. My heart sank before I even looked inside. Legal documents. The Marlowe family name stamped at the top. I sank into my chair, the weight of the envelope heavy in my lap. The lawsuit was clear. Defamation, libel, emotional distress. They were suing me, my own parents and Astrid, for millions of dollars. Their claims? That I'd knowingly spread false stories intended to damage the Marlowe family's public image. That I'd fabricated scandals and weaponized private family matters for personal gain. I read the accusations 3 times before I could even process them. This wasn't just another smear campaign. They wanted to destroy me, legally, financially, permanently. My phone buzzed on my desk. Mara's name flashed on the screen. I couldn't answer, not yet. I spent the rest of the day locked in my office. The lawsuit spread across my desk like a death sentence. Every line felt like a knife, every accusation designed to make me feel small, guilty, worthless. By evening, I forced myself to leave. The office was empty by then, staff gone home, unaware of the storm about to hit. On my way out, I glanced at the calendar on the wall. February 1st, exactly 1 year since Astrid's televised stunt. It felt like the universe was mocking me. That weekend, I agreed to attend a charity fundraiser Mara had invited me to months ago. I didn't want to go, but I needed a break, even if it meant pretending for a few hours that my life wasn't falling apart. The ballroom was packed, glittering gowns and pressed suits everywhere. I barely made it through small talk and forced smiles when I heard a voice behind me. Well, if it isn't the ghost of the family. I turned. Dorian, Astrid's childhood friend. One of the few people who had ever looked at me like I was human back then. He looked awkward, drink in hand, shifting his weight like he wanted to be anywhere but here. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, clearing his throat. "Trust me," I replied flatly. "Neither did I." We exchanged small talk, surface-level pleasantries, until, halfway through his second drink, he leaned in and muttered, "You know, I probably shouldn't say this, but last Christmas, your dad was ranting about offshore accounts. Said something about needing to clean up before the IRS got curious." I blinked. He kept talking, voice low. "I didn't catch much, just that your mom funneled donations through some charity that doesn't exist. Something about Cayman accounts, I think." He laughed awkwardly. Typical Marlowe drama, right? My heart raced beneath my calm expression. When I got home that night, I sat at my desk, lawsuit still staring at me like a loaded weapon. But this time, something felt different. I opened my laptop. In my inbox, a message from Dorian. "Hey, not sure if it matters, but I found the name of that offshore firm. Let me know if you want it." I stared at the screen, a slow, cold smile creeping across my face. They think they can sue me into silence? They're about to learn who I've become. That thought burned inside me for weeks after Dorian's email arrived in my inbox. A tiny ember I fanned into something sharp and dangerous. It wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about ending the game they'd been playing with me since the day they threw me out. By the fall of 2020, I had clawed SafePaw back from the edge. It wasn't easy. I lost clients, employees, even friends who had quietly distanced themselves when the lawsuits hit the press. But the business survived, and so did I. Most nights now, I worked late in Quentin's law office, tucked away in downtown Dallas, surrounded by stacks of folders and spreadsheets instead of pet food and customer orders. Quentin, my attorney, one of the few people who hadn't abandoned me when the headlines turned ugly, sat across from me, glasses low on his nose, scanning a spreadsheet like it held the secrets of the universe. "You're sure you want to go this route?" he asked without looking up. "I've spent years letting them pull the strings," I said quietly. "It ends now." He slid a file across the desk. Inside were copies of the documents Dorian had referenced, the ones that had taken Quentin weeks to quietly gather through legal backchannels. Tax records, bank transfers, letters of donation that funneled money through fake charities, straight into offshore accounts in the Caymans. At the bottom of one page, in crisp black ink, was my signature. forged neatly beside financial authorizations I'd never seen before. "They used your name in several shell companies," Quentin said. "You were listed as co-signer on at least 3 charitable foundations that don't exist." I swallowed hard, my pulse roaring in my ears. They hadn't just stolen my reputation. They had stolen my name, my identity, again, to launder money. "This is enough to sink them," Quentin continued. "Tax fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud, and with Dorian's testimony—" He didn't need to finish. I stared at the papers, each line of numbers and fake signatures like a nail in the coffin they'd built for themselves. Weeks passed as we quietly prepared the case. I stayed off social media. I didn't respond to comments, rumors, or press inquiries. Until one Thursday morning, when everything erupted again. I was in the middle of reviewing invoices at SafePaw when my phone buzzed uncontrollably. Dozens of missed calls, texts, emails, all with the same subject line. "Breaking, Hillary Marlowe accused of blackmail." I clicked one of the articles, my heart sinking as I read. In an exclusive statement, sources close to the Marlowe family claim their estranged daughter has attempted to extort money in exchange for keeping private family matters secret. The family is heartbroken by her actions and intends to take appropriate legal steps. A video clip played beneath the headline. My parents' attorney stood outside the courthouse, solemn-faced, saying, "We had hoped to resolve this privately. Unfortunately, Ms. Marlowe has left us no choice." My hands trembled as I set the phone down. They'd leaked the lawsuit to the media, twisted the narrative again, painted me as the villain, the unstable daughter desperate for money. By noon, my inbox was filled with hateful messages, news outlets requesting statements, clients asking if I was involved in criminal activity. Quentin called that afternoon. "You saw it?" he asked. "They're trying to force my hand," I said quietly. "They want you to fold." I looked out the office window, the Dallas skyline sharp against the evening sky. "Well," I said slowly, "they're about to learn something new about me." That night, Quentin and I sat across from each other in his office, documents and digital files spread across the table like weapons ready for battle. I glanced at him, my voice calm but edged with steel. "Enough games. It's time to end this." Those words were the last thing I told Quentin before we stepped into the storm. For weeks we prepared. Every falsified signature, every shady email, every document they'd buried, I gathered them like weapons, brick by brick. Quentin stayed late with me, night after night, tightening every legal knot until there wasn't a single thread left loose. Then December arrived, cold and sharp, and with it, an invitation. Astrid's engagement party. It was everywhere. Glossy magazines, social media, society pages. The crown jewel of the Marlowe family's perfect image, the Ashbury Grand Hotel, the most expensive ballroom in Dallas. Hundreds of guests, politicians, CEOs, high society names, the perfect stage. That night, I stood outside the Grand's glowing entrance, the winter air biting against my skin. I wore a simple black fitted dress, no glitter, no diamonds, a deliberate contrast to the silk and shine waiting inside. As I stepped through the doors, the ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and carefully curated smiles. Music floated over the low hum of conversation. No one noticed me at first, a ghost moving through a sea of masks. But that wouldn't last. I walked slowly, past faces I knew too well, past strangers who only knew the version of me my family had sold to the tabloids. At the front of the room, beneath 1,000 sparkling lights, Astrid stood in white, radiant, her fiancé smiling at her side. The music softened as she took the microphone. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began sweetly. "It means everything to celebrate this next chapter, surrounded by family and friends." I waited until the applause died down. Then I stepped forward. Heads turned. Whispers rippled like a wave. I stopped a few feet from the stage, meeting Astrid's eyes. Her smile faltered. From my clutch, I pulled a black envelope, sealed in red wax. "Forgive the interruption," I said, voice clear and even. But I thought the truth deserved a place at tonight's celebration. The room fell silent. I handed the envelope to Dorian, Astrid's fiancé, standing near the edge of the stage. Open it. He hesitated, then broke the seal and unfolded the papers. His eyes scanned the pages, widening with every line. Astrid shifted beside him, her posture stiff. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued, inside that envelope is proof that Astrid Marlowe never completed medical school, that her career, her credentials, all lies, lies she built using my name. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I wasn't finished. From my bag, I pulled a slim flash drive. Quentin, standing near the back, gave a small nod. The projector behind the stage flickered to life. One by one, the documents appeared on screen. Forged signatures, falsified tax records, charity donations laundered through offshore accounts, emails with my name attached, twisting me into their lies. Each slide cracked the Marlowe family's pristine mask. Corinne's face drained of color. Gareth stood rigid, jaw tight. The final image lingered, a spreadsheet mapping every fraudulent dollar. The room erupted. Guests whispered behind their hands. Some stared openly. Some quietly slipped toward the exits. Then the ballroom doors swung open. 2 federal agents entered, followed by 2 IRS officers. They moved fast, cutting through the crowd. Corinne Marlowe and Gareth Marlowe, one agent announced. You're under arrest for tax fraud, money laundering, and falsification of financial records. Corinne straightened, already slipping into her well-rehearsed calm. This is a mistake, she said smoothly. We'll clear this up. The agent didn't flinch. Gareth said nothing. He didn't even lift his head. Handcuffs clicked shut around their wrists. The crowd watched in stunned silence. I stood still, heart pounding, not with fear, but something colder. Vindication. As they passed me, Corinne's gaze met mine, sharp, disbelieving. I didn't look away. I walked to the microphone, the ballroom silent but for my steps. I took one breath. You erased me from this family, I said quietly, but tonight I erased your lies. I left the stage without looking back. At the door, I heard Astrid's voice behind me. Soft, desperate. Wait! Hillary, please! I glanced over my shoulder long enough to see her collapse, white dress crumpling around her like wilted petals. I kept walking. They thought they'd buried me. But tonight, I buried them. You erased me from this family, but tonight, I erased your lies. That sentence echoed in every news headline the next morning. It was everywhere. Television, newspapers, social media. Clips of my parents being handcuffed. Snapshots of Astrid collapsing on that polished marble floor. Their fall was the city's favorite spectacle, and I had set the match. For the first time in years, the world wasn't pointing fingers at me. Instead, it stared wide-eyed at the wreckage of the Marlowe family. But victory, I quickly learned, wasn't sweet. It was hollow. The days that followed blurred together. Reporters camped outside my apartment. Strangers sent flowers and apology notes. Others sent hate mail, convinced I had destroyed a good, respectable family. I turned off my phone, pulled the curtains shut, went back to working at SafePaw quietly, rebuilding order in the only part of my life I could control. On the third night, I sat alone in my living room, a cup of tea untouched in my hands, when the knock came. It was nearly midnight. I opened the door to find Astrid standing there, or what was left of her. Her eyes were hollow, rimmed red, mascara smeared down her cheeks. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her hands trembling at her sides. Please, she whispered. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't step aside. I didn't invite her in. She stood there on the doorstep, the cold night pressing in around us. I have nothing left, she said, voice breaking. They're gone. The money, the name, everything. Tears slid down her face as she looked at me, desperate, defeated. You're my sister, she said, voice cracking. Please, Hillary, forgive me. I didn't mean for any of this. I didn't know how to stop. I felt something shift in my chest. Not pity, not hate. Something colder, sadder. You had choices, I said quietly. Every step of the way, you had choices. She shook her head, a sob escaping her lips. It was them, she insisted. Mom and Dad. They made me believe you were the problem, that you were dangerous. I didn't realize until it was too late. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could have lied, told her I forgave her, pretended this was the ending she wanted. Instead, I took a breath and said the only truth left between us. You didn't destroy me, Astrid, but you tried. Her shoulders collapsed, the weight of everything finally crushing her. She fell to her knees right there in the hallway, sobbing uncontrollably. I didn't move. Eventually, Mara showed up, her face grim, Dorian trailing behind her. They stayed back, letting Astrid crumble without interference. The next day, Mara texted me. Astrid's under psychiatric watch. She tried to hurt herself. They'll keep her there for now. I stared at the message longer than I should have. I wasn't surprised. That night, I stood by my apartment window, watching the Dallas skyline stretch far into the distance, city lights flickering like scattered memories. I thought about how easy it would have been to become them, to twist my pain into something destructive, to let it rot me from the inside out. Instead, I had done the only thing they never expected. I had survived. I whispered to the empty room, voice steady despite the ache in my chest. I didn't destroy them. I just stopped letting them destroy me. I didn't destroy them. I just stopped letting them destroy me. Those words stayed with me long after the headlines faded and the cameras moved on to the next scandal. It's strange how quickly the world moves when you're no longer at the center of its spectacle. In the weeks after that night at the Ashbury Grand, the Marlowe name became a cautionary tale. Corinne and Gareth's court dates were scheduled, the charges stacked against them like dominoes: fraud, tax evasion, identity theft. The press ran updates every morning, but by afternoon, the city had turned its attention elsewhere. And me? I quietly picked up the pieces of the life they hadn't managed to shatter. Mara started stopping by the diner again, sometimes bringing coffee, sometimes just herself. One gray January morning, I sat across from her at our usual booth, the hum of conversation around us comforting in its ordinariness. You know, she said, stirring sugar into her coffee, you could have burned everything down, but you didn't. I gave her a tired smile. Maybe I did. Just not the way they expected. She reached across the table, her fingers wrapping gently around mine. You made it out, Hillary. That's what matters. It wasn't until I got home that evening, my apartment unusually quiet, that I let her words sink in. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was breathing, finally, without the weight of their shadows pressing on my chest. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a message from Dorian. You did what no one else could. Thank you. Short, simple, enough. The Marlowe estate had been sold at auction, the mansion stripped bare like a forgotten ruin. I hadn't gone near it until that morning, when I found myself driving past the iron gates, now rusting, the hedges overgrown. I pulled over, sitting in silence, as I stared at what used to be my childhood home. The windows were dark, the driveway empty. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. Later that week, I walked into SafePaw's new storefront on Maple Avenue. We'd finally reopened, smaller but sturdier. No flash, no headlines, just the work I'd built with my own hands, brick by brick. Quentin met me there, carrying a folder. You're officially free, he said, handing me the papers. Everything's cleared. You own this business outright. No lawsuits, no liens. I took the documents, running my fingers over the embossed seal at the bottom. For the first time, I said quietly, I'm not surviving. I'm living. He smiled at me, that rare, genuine smile of his. You earned it. As the afternoon light slanted across the pavement, I stood outside the storefront, watching customers come and go. Life wasn't perfect. The scars hadn't vanished, Astrid remained under psychiatric care. Our parents' trials were still pending. Some people still whispered when they heard my name. But none of it owned me anymore. I walked back inside, the bell above the door chiming softly, and closed it behind me. Looking back, I realize now, this wasn't a story about revenge. It was about survival, about reclaiming the parts of myself that my own family tried to erase. If you've ever felt like you weren't enough, if you've ever been told you're too broken, too messy, too much, let me remind you, you don't need anyone's permission to live your truth. I spent years trying to prove my worth to people who would never see it. And the moment I stopped fighting for their approval, I finally started fighting for myself. Family can love you, but they can also lie to you. They can lift you up or tear you down. But at the end of the day, it's not their version of you that matters. It's who you choose to become. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to walk away from people you thought would never hurt you? If so, how did you find your way back to yourself? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if this video touched you, if it made you think about your own family, your own scars, drop a number 1 in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. Or, if this video made you uncomfortable, if you didn't like it, tell me why. Let's talk about it. This channel is a place for real stories, real emotions, and real conversations. And hey, if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.